Okay, so the session is called 6 Guidelines for Writing Better Email. The content of this session is taken from my longer training workshops, which run either, these days everything is virtual. I run longer writing workshops. One runs over 2 virtual sessions of 3.5 hours each. The other one runs over 4 virtual sessions of 3.5 hours each. So there's a lot more than just these 6 guidelines, but I do believe these 6 guidelines form a very solid foundation if you do want to write better email. So just to jump straight in, this is an overview of the session. We're going to start with 2 foundational quotes, and you'll understand why these are so important. And then we're going to go through the 6 guidelines. And I'll just quickly mention them. Put your reader first. Be plain. Be professional. Write good subject lines. Get your tone right. Edit and proofread. So those are the 6 guidelines we're going to go through. And we will have questions and answers or question session at the end. But also as we go through, please ask questions, as I've already said. And as we go through, I'm also going to pose 1 or 2 questions to you, which you can either answer if you like. You can answer verbally or put your answers in the chat. So jumping straight in, 2 foundational quotes. This is the first quote. What is written without effort is generally read without pleasure. And I want you just to reflect on that quote, and then I'm going to pose a question to you. The second quote is, good writing makes the reader feel smart, while bad writing makes the writer feel smart. And my question to you, which you can just reflect on, and if someone wants to offer an answer, that would be great, is what connects these 2 quotes, or what do these 2 quotes have in common? So I'll just give you a moment to reflect on those. Okay, so anyone want to offer an answer? What connects those quotes, or what do they have in common? Okay, so hopefully you're pondering or you're thinking about something in your head, and you might have a different answer to mine, but I believe, let me just quickly check something in the chat. Sorry, I'm just going. Yes, writing, definitely. But I would say, and I'm glad Bruce put that up, because I would disagree with Bruce. Because I think what those quotes, and he's done me a big favor, in fact, I think what those quotes have in common is not writing, but reading. That's really what those quotes have in common, is that there's a reader involved in everything you write. And so the first quote has the verb read, and the second quote has the noun, the reader. And this is often glaringly obvious, but we lose sight of this fact that everything we write has a reader. And we should work very hard to make the reader's life, to use the word from the first quote, pleasurable. And the second quote is kind of coming at things from a different angle. It's saying that good writing makes the reader feel smart. And that's key, because often we think we're great writers. We write something, we say, wow, look how clever I am. By the time it gets to the reader, they're sweating. They're struggling through those big fancy words and those complicated sentences. And they actually feel quite stupid in a way, or maybe they feel they haven't had enough sleep or something. But we want to make the writer's life as easy as possible. Now, there's so much I could say about this. I already was thinking to connect this to what Bruce said at the beginning, that in fact, if you're writing at a grade 7 or 8 level, that's perfectly acceptable. And it's perfectly acceptable in business South Africa. And that's the level you should be really writing at, in terms of making the reader's life easy, that they can process what you've written and understand it very quickly. So that's by way of introduction. So let me jump in straight away in the first guideline. The first guideline is put your reader first. And this makes a lot of sense because we've said so much about the reader through those quotes. And we're saying this is the fundamental first guideline, is to think about your reader and put him first in everything you write. So what it means fundamentally is that you should become reader-centered as opposed to writer-centered. Now, this is a simple yet quite profound distinction. That's where you want to be, is up at the top, is reader-centered. You're thinking hard about your reader in everything you write. Where we are naturally and by default, because it's just how we are designed, is writer-centered. So we actually have to, and I'd say the majority of us, 95+%, are writer-centered when we sit down to write something. So we have to actually work quite hard. We have to force ourselves to think, no, what we're writing is not about me, it's about the person who is going to read this. So to become reader-centered, there are a number of things. I'm going to pull out a few points. You need to plan with your reader squarely in mind. So from the planning stage of your writing, you're thinking about who is the person or people who are going to read this. Reader-centered writing responds to your reader's needs and answers their questions or their likely questions. So you want to be thinking, why is the reader going to want to read this? What questions might they have? And how can I answer those? Reader-centered writing uses the pronouns you and yours frequently. So literally at a word level, if you're reader-centered, you should be using more you and yours versus I and we. Now, there's more to it than that, but often this is a very simple, quick way to gauge or evaluate whether you are reader-centered versus writer-centered. Look at something you've written recently and see, are you using predominantly you and yours? Or are you using predominantly I, we, and our? If you're using predominantly I, we, and our, you're probably being pretty writer-centered. And you want to take measures to be more reader-centered. Reader-centered writing is highly readable. So there's a whole load we can say about readability and how do you become highly readable. But you want to work towards becoming highly readable. Simplest level, use ordinary language. Use normal words. Use short, simple sentences. Reader-centered writing recognizes a few truths about human nature. So what are these truths? People are self-centered. They want to know what's in it for me. So you need to address that and answer that question pretty quickly. They're going to start reading something you've written to them. They want to understand what's in it for them. And you need to have thought hard about that reader so you can address that question. People expect courtesy and people are defensive. I'm going to take those two together. Especially in email. Email is just this medium where if the reader can misunderstand it, they're going to. So you have to work very hard to be polite. And it's not saying every time you be polite. Sometimes you will want to be rude, but then you're doing it with awareness and consciousness. But by default, work hard, be polite, unless you intentionally mean to be rude, and that's different. So here are some examples, and this is very at a sentence level of writer-centered versus reader-centered. So here's a writer-centered sentence. We need to know how many copies we have to provide. Now, we know that's writer-centered because it starts with the word we, and then there's another we. So it's very much about the writer. Whereas if the writer had thought a little bit harder, they could have made that reader-centered and said something like this. Will you confirm how many copies you need? So now, instead of about me, now it's about you, the reader. I've introduced two pronouns, you. I'm talking to you. Here's another one. We dispatched the order this morning to arrive by the end of July. It's writer-centered because it starts with we. It's what we are doing. But what's in it for the reader? So I'm going to pause for a moment. You can just reflect on this mentally or you can write it down. How could you make that sentence reader-centered? I'll give you a moment to think. Okay, so maybe you've got an answer in your head, maybe you wrote it down, maybe you came up with something like this, which would be great. Your order was dispatched this morning and you should receive it by the end of July. And I'm just looking at an answer in the chat. The package was dispatched to you this morning. So very nice. So there's another possibility by Michelle in the chat. Very nice. So again, I must just stress, because I say this all the time in the writing course, there's no perfect answer. There are model answers, but because of the nature of writing, there's going to be variability. So I think what Michelle has put in the chat would be great. The package was dispatched to you this morning, so you should get it by the end of July. It's great because we've replaced those we's with you's. We're now addressing the reader. So this might be self-evident, but it raises the question, why make your writing reader-centered? That is the question. And I'm going to pause a moment, and I'm going to encourage you just to think of, you don't have to come up with exactly 3 points, but think to yourself, and if you like, put some answers in the chat. Why is it a good idea, as the question says, why is it a good idea to make your writing reader-centered? I'm going to pause again to give you a moment to reflect, and if you like, put some answers in the chat and I'll have a look. Okay, I'm just starting to read some answers. Thank you for those who put it in. And from younger, you want to make the reader feel acknowledged so that they can better engage with the communication. Very nice. Engagement, accountability from Bruce. Thank you. From Karen. It's about serving them, not my business, 100%. And they feel important. Yes. Okay, so you totally get the idea. And I'm going to put up, so thank you for those who put those in. I'm going to put up some additional answers, which I think just build on from what you've already said. So why make your writing reader-centered? Readers will respond better if they feel the writer has understood their needs and they feel they are the most important person, at least in this exchange, in this communication. Now, that might sound mildly manipulative, and it is, but it's towards a good point. It's towards a good end. And so this idea of reader-centered, we could extend to communication per se, because we want to make our communication recipient-centered. If we want to be good communicators, we need to be thinking hard about the receiver. Make our communication recipient-centered. Some other reasons. So if the goal in so much of business writing is to get our readers to do what we want them to do, we have to make them believe that they are valued and appreciated. Now, again, this might sound relatively crude, but most business writing is aiming to bring about some kind of result, some outcome. And most of the time that outcome is the reader is going to do something. Sometimes they're going to think something, sometimes they're going to feel something as a result of reading what you've written to them. But mostly it's a do. And if we want to increase the chances that they will do what we want them to do, we should make them feel valued and appreciated. But sincerely, we do value and appreciate them. And so we are reader-centered in our writing. Reader-centered writing combats information overload. It's a slightly different reason for being reader-centered. There's too much information going around. We don't want to contribute unnecessarily to it. How does reader-centered writing combat information overload? Because we are thinking hard about our reader, what their needs and wants are, and we're giving them only that. We're not giving them information that they didn't ask for. We're not answering questions they didn't even have. We're only giving them what they need as far as possible. And it's from that point of view, we are combating information overload. Sorry, before I go on, I'm going to pause momentarily and just see if there are any questions to this first guideline, anything that's come to mind at the moment. And this is the guideline I'm going to spend most of, I have in fact spend most of the time on. The others I'm going to go through a little bit quicker. But reader centricity, or putting your reader first, is so foundational. Okay, so maybe some questions still will come to mind, and we'll take those at the end. All right, so let's move on to the second main guideline, which is be plain. And maybe you've heard something about the plain language movement or plain English movement. So What is writing in plain language? So there are a number of definitions, but this is one that I particularly like, and I'm going to share this one with you. Plain language is the writing and setting out of essential information in a way that gives a cooperative, motivated person a good chance of understanding it at first reading, and in the same sense that the writer meant it to be understood. So what is bolded in this definition is at first reading. Why is this bolded? Because I think it's such a great and practical way to understand good writing. Is good writing, or a piece of good writing, is something that the reader can read once, understand, and process. And if you achieve that as a writer, so in other words, the person you're writing to, they read it once and understand it, it means you've done a great job as the writer. And yes, it goes back to the quote that good writing makes the reader feel clever. That's true. They might read it once and think, wow, I must be pretty sharp today. But in fact, it's something you did as the writer. And to achieve this almost gold standard of reading a document once and understanding it, you've done a lot as the writer. And one of the things you've done is you've written in plain language. And yes, plain language is a big area. We're going to say a few things about it. So KISS is a nice acronym to understand plain language, which is variably understood as keep it short and simple, or keep it short and sweet. That's what you want to achieve in your writing. Short sentences, short words, so you're not using fancy multi-syllable words, and you get to the point quickly. Yes, you don't want to sacrifice politeness and courtesy. You still want to remain friendly and engaging, but you have to find that balance, and you need to balance it with keeping things short and simple. Normal versus formal, just a few words about this. You want to be on the normal end of the spectrum. Using normal, I mean, normal is really a synonym for plain, as opposed to formal, and sometimes I substitute other words. Pompous, fancy, old-fashioned, that's all out. That's where it equates with formal. You want to be normal, ordinary, plain. Avoid jargon as far as possible. So what is jargon? Jargon is language specific to a specific industry or specific field. Avoid jargon as far as possible. We're not outlawing jargon. Jargon is good, but you have to think about your reader. Will they understand it how you understand? So we come back to putting your reader first. Short, simple sentences. Definitely. What's a guideline? We can actually give a figure. We'd say on average, the number of words per sentence should be 15 to 20 words. So it's an average in your entire email. We can apply this even to documents like reports. 15 to 20 words per sentence. It's an average, so it means some will be shorter, some will be longer, but you want to try and achieve that average. Be human. We can connect that to plain. Avoid what I call standard plug-in phrases. So a very relatively innocent example of a plug-in phrase is the classic, which I'm sure you've all used. Dear Mrs. Smith, herewith please find attached. That's what I'd call a standard plug-in phrase. Why is it bad? Is because it sounds like a robot has written to me. There's no humanity in it. It's also bad because if you were talking to that person face to face, you're giving them a document, you wouldn't say, hello, Mrs. Smith, here with the document you asked for. You wouldn't use that language when you speak. So don't use that language when you write. And yes, it's kind of risky what I'm saying because I'm almost equating writing with speaking, and they are still very different, although the two have come closer together. There are definite writing conventions that are different you don't use in speaking. But at a vocabulary level, a phrase level, don't use phrases you wouldn't use if you were speaking to the person. It's not human. And finally, it diminishes the engagement between you and the person you're writing to. Use the active voice. So this is one that comes up a lot in almost any writing course. You'll be told, write in the active, not the passive. So I can't go into this in detail, but what's the difference? The difference is John kicked the ball is active. The ball was kicked by John is passive. You want to rather be using the first. John kicked the ball. Use active. it's more engaging, it's more direct, it's more straightforward, and it is one of the plain language principles. So that's guideline 2, be plain. Guideline 3 sounds pretty broad, be professional. So there's so much said about professional, professional, professional. But what does it mean? And it's a question I'm posing to you again. And I'm going to ask you to either answer or write in the chat. What does it mean to be professional when writing email? So again, I want you just to think of 1 or 2 points, and I'm going to give you a moment. I'm going to pause. You can write it in the chat. What does it mean to be professional when writing email? Okay, great. There's some coming in, so I'm going to share them if you aren't reading them. Thank you, Michelle. Where was I now? Yeah, don't tell your personal story. Very nice. I'm going to connect that to something else I'm going to talk about. Avoid familiarity clauses. Okay, I'd like to know more about that, but I definitely like the word familiarity. Don't be familiar. No slang or humor. Yes, thank you, Bruce. Definitely agree. Avoid swearing even when you want to. Delfino, thank you for that. Yes, that would all capture this idea of professional, courteous and brief. Thank you, Lorato. All right, very nice points. And what I'm very pleased to see, maybe it's coming in, maybe you'll stop typing when I say this. What I'm very pleased to see is no one has put the word formal. And why do I say this? Because sometimes when I ask people, what does it mean to be professional? They say, it means you must be formal. Okay, that was maybe 50 years ago, maybe more. Professional does not equate with formal. But the words, and I'm going to say more about this now, but what you guys have put up there, it's spot on. So I'm going to add to that. Professional means put your reader first. I have to put this up there again. I have to tie it to that point. You're thinking hard about your reader. That's professional. And it equates with all the good things like put your client first. Think hard about your customer centricity, etc. That's professional. Be human. It's professional. And this is why formal is a bad thing, because you start writing in formal language, it's going to distance your reader. It's going to push them away. They're going to feel like this person's not engaging with me at all. So it becomes non-human in a sense, like a machine is writing to them. Be polite. We had that point. Courteous, polite. Same thing. You can't escape good grammar and punctuation, I'm afraid. This is part of what makes you professional. And why do I say this is because people are very quick to evaluate and judge you if your grammar or punctuation is not up to par. And yes, it comes down to opinion most of the time. But still, if they see you've put that comma in the wrong place or you haven't included an apostrophe, they're going to make an opinion about you, and then they're going to have an opinion about your organization. So you have to use good grammar. You have to have good punctuation. Write in full sentences. Why do I specifically mention this one? Yeah, I'm just picking up one more from Natalie. Being professional means don't use SMS language or WhatsApp slang. 100%. And that point you've just made, Natalie, ties in very nicely with this point, write in full sentences. Why do I include this point? It's almost beautifully tying in with what Natalie said, because where do we not write in full sentences? And technically a not full sentence is called a fragment. We use fragments a lot in WhatsApp, and people are doing it all the time. They communicate in fragments. Fragments are just unprofessional, but even worse than that, fragments cause confusion and ambiguity. I'm sure you've had the experience. You get a WhatsApp message and you're not quite clear what's going on. There could be other reasons, but I think one of the primary reasons is the person has used a fragment. And fragments are open for interpretation. Don't use them in business writing. Get the tone right. So tone is this very big area. We're going to touch on, it's the final, second to last guideline we're going to talk about today. You need to get the tone right. It ties in with professionality. Don't use formal language. I think I've stressed that enough. There's familiar. Don't be familiar, okay, which is someone had that point, is familiarity is unprofessional. The tricky thing though, and we've got 3 F's, formal is out, familiar is out. The third F is friendly. You want to be friendly in your communication. You want to be friendly in how you write to people. But that's the tricky thing because we need to find the balance, and sometimes too friendly can slip into familiar, and that's going to be bad. So you need to, and you don't want to be unfriendly because you're being too formal. So yes, you need to find that balance, but we want to be friendly. And lastly, don't be aloof, which we could argue aloofness comes from formal language, but aloofness might also come from tone. Aloof is at the other end of the spectrum. We got very familiar, and then we got aloof, arrogant, like self-important. That's not going to do you any favors when communicating, certainly not if that's how you come across in your writing. Okay, so let's go on to guideline, and please interject at any time if you have a question. Although, as I say, we will take them at the end, but if you have a question, just ask now. So let's go on to guideline 4. Write good subject lines. And I guess the first point is you definitely don't want to do what Homer Simpson's doing in that cartoon. He's wanting to put his whole email in his subject line. Now that might sound laughable, might sound absurd, but believe it or not, people do it. You can't put your whole email in the subject line. I really hope none of you would think of doing that. But what should you do? So your subject line should give your reader a very good idea what your email is about. You're doing them a big courteousness, a big favor. You're almost to the point where they can understand what your email is about without even opening your email. What is a subject line? We can think of your subject line as a nutshell version of your key message, or a condensed version of your key message. Now, just to say a few more words about that point, every email you write has a key message. What is the key message? It's the one thing in your email that you don't want your reader to forget, even if they forget everything else. And they're liable to, because everyone's getting so much email bombarding them, but you can't afford that they will forget your key message. So you've got to crystallize your key message. Ideally, get it as high as possible in your email as possible. And then your subject line is a nutshell of the key message. So if you're struggling to write a subject line, it's often an indication that you're probably not clear what your key message is. So it's a nice test. So already, I guess I've alluded to one implication is write your subject line last. Don't write it first, because unless you're incredibly clear thinking, you're not going to know what your key message is until you've written your email. Write your email, then write your subject line. And the other implication is that your subject line can be more than just 1 or 2 words. In fact, a subject line can safely be up to 10, 12 words long. So some key words that describe subject lines. Subject lines should be specific. They should be descriptive and informative. That's what you need to achieve with your subject line. They need to be specific, descriptive, and informative. If you're achieving all of that, you've written a good subject line. Just one last point on subject lines. Most of what we say in terms of these guidelines is towards the benefit of the reader, but good subject lines are one of the things that benefit you as the writer as well. Why is this? Because when you go and search for that subject line, when you go and search for that email in your archive folders, subject lines are one way that we search, and a very helpful way that we search. So if we've written good subject lines, it helps us as we look for that email. Okay, guideline 5. Get your tone right. So first question I want to ask you, and I'm going to give you a little second moment to answer. What is tone? Or maybe more specifically, what is tone in writing? Anyone, you can put an answer in the chat. I'll give you half a minute. Okay, so yeah, Michelle's saying no caps. Definitely caps can give the wrong tone. It can sound like shouting. It just comes across as rude. Okay, very nice, Karen. Attitude, yes, I'd agree 100%. Tone is related to attitude. Okay, it's how we, Cindy said the mood. Yes, very nice. It's how we feel about authoritative. Natalie says you will do this with caps. Will is an authoritative tone. So yes, mood, attitude, it's how we feel about the reader, and it's how we feel about the subject we're writing about. Why is tone so important? So the main reason it's so important is that as readers, it's almost the first thing we respond to. So if I open an email and I start reading and I perceive something in this email and I go, why is she being so sarcastic? Now that's the filter I'm going to read the rest of the email through. So I've already labeled this as sarcasm, or she's being sarcastic. And then everything from then on, I'm going to interpret through that label. I'm just reading a few more messages in the chat. Yeah, tone is a huge problem in text messages. In any relationship community, it is not what you say, it's how you say it, 100%. So if we were speaking to someone face to face, the tone of our voice is so important. That's the how. In writing, it's the same. There's a how comes through. In text messages, and even in certain companies in email writing, one way we try to overcome this problem of interpretation is we use emojis or emoticons. So emojis has got built into it almost this word emotion. So because of this limitation in writing, or this perceived limitation that we think we can't express ourselves, so we're just going to pop in an emoji. That's one of the uses for emojis. But in a word, a few words, emojis don't solve the problem, okay? Because emojis can still create misunderstanding. They can still create confusion. And on another point is emojis mostly are not acceptable in business writing yet. Yeah, maybe in a few years' time, emojis will become more mainstream in business writing, but until now, they're not really accepted. They're not really professional. So the bottom line is you have to work harder with your words. You have to have some understanding what tone is. You have to have an awareness of tone. And then you have to work harder with your words, because that answers this question. How do you get the tone right? It's on the way to answering this question. Is how do you get the tone right? You ask, who am I writing to? What's my relationship with this person? You then ask, what is my purpose in writing to them? And then you ask, what result do I want? So understanding this, what result do I want, is as a result of reading my email, what do I want them to do? Or what do I want them to think? Or what do I want them to feel? I need to answer these questions, and then I need to choose the right words, phrases, and sentences. Now, this might sound relatively simplistic, because what I'm saying here is finally tone comes down to choice. But that choice you're making having answered these three questions. But it is finally choice, because if I choose certain words and phrases, the tone is going to be very different to if I choose other words and phrases. But I'm making that choice having understood the relationship with the person I'm writing to, my purpose in writing to them, and the outcome or result I want. So there's more we could say about tone, but I think, in fact, the simpler you keep tone, the better, because it's a slippery area. It can get very confusing. Just think of it as feeling, attitude, mood, and then have an awareness, because I think awareness goes a very long way as well. And then choose the right words or phrases. Okay, which brings us to guideline number 6, which is edit and proofread. So to take us, it's a small, I'm not going to say a lot, but I want to bring in a quote here, which comes from a book called On Writing Well by William Zinser. It's a great book on writing if you want to read further about writing. But he said this about editing and proofreading. He said, writing is the essence of writing well. It's where the game is won or lost. So he's using this word broadly, rewriting. So he's really talking about what happens in the third stage of writing. So we can think of writing as having three stages. There's a pre-writing stage, which is really where we plan. There's a writing stage, when we actually do the writing, and then there's post-writing. And in post-writing, that's where you rewrite, in Mr. Zinser's terminology. It's also where you edit and proofread. And what is he saying in the way he phrases it? It's where the game is won or lost. Rewriting is really where good writing happens. So regardless of what you're writing, arguably from the simplest WhatsApp message to a complicated report and everything in between, you should have a very definite post-writing stage where you go back and you do three things. You proofread, you edit, and you rewrite, or possibly in the other order. You rewrite, you edit, and you proofread. But ultimately, you're making what you've written better. So the main thing about the third stage of writing, the post-writing stage or rewriting stage, is you need fresh eyes. This is the best way to understand what happens in rewriting, especially when it comes to editing and proofreading. You need to somehow have fresh eyes. Why do I say this? Because you spent quite a bit of time with that email, that document. You know it so well, so you're not going to pick up mistakes. So how do you get fresh eyes? Well, the best fresh eyes are if you give your document to someone else. They read it, they're going to see stuff you don't see. This is not always possible, of course, because your colleagues are busy. They've got enough time writing their own email, they don't want to look at yours. But if you can give it to someone else, it's the best strategy. But how else can you get fresh eyes? These are a few ideas. Put the document aside for a few minutes, even overnight is better. Then come back to it, because when you come back to it, you're going to have fresh eyes. You're going to see things you didn't see before. Print a hard copy of your document. Something happens different in our brain when we read a hard copy. And we're going to see stuff we won't see on the screen. Read the document aloud. Okay, if you can find a place not to disturb anyone, read what you've written aloud. Again, it's something happens when we reading and hearing what we've written, you're going to pick up mistakes. And the last strategy, I wouldn't advise this with a long report, but you can certainly do it with emails, is to read from the bottom of the email to the top. So read backwards through your email. So you read the last sentence, the second to last sentence, the third, etc., etc. It's a great strategy. Why? Because you're taking every sentence out of context. You're going to find things you wouldn't have seen otherwise. But you need to have, whatever happens, you need to have a definite post-writing stage where you rewrite, edit, and proofread, because this is where good writing happens. Okay, so quick summary, and then I'm going to take some questions and open it up. Those are the 6 guidelines. Put your reader first, be plain, be professional, write good subject lines, get your tone right, edit, and proofread. Yes, right at the bottom, so that's my website, thelanguageboss.com, and my email address is michael@thelanguageboss.com.